What is going on, and welcome to the Lunchtime Livestream. As always, I am going to be joined in just a few minutes by Robert Harlemert. But for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, my name is John Kelly. I'm the Minister of Engagement here at Catalyst. And we've only got really one event going on right now that I'm going to announce today, and that's just the men's retreat. The 5-Bar Connection is going to be Friday. That's this coming week. Not this week, but the next week, Friday, May 14th from 5 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at Shane Short's house. It's a free event for men and boys of all ages. Lots of games, lots of food, lots of fun, and a great time of discussion. If you want to find out anything that's going on at Catalyst Christian Church, you can go over to catalystchristian.net, click on the main thing tab, and you'll find everything there from this past Sunday's bulletin to sermon links to the audio and video files of what we talked about each and every single week. With all of that said, now I want to bring in the man of the hour, Mr. Robert Harlemert himself. How are you, man?
Hello. Good. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I know you don't want me to say this, but I'm gonna say it. We only have a few of these left.
You're right.
And so I'm excited about these last chances we have here to do these, because as you can tell by the shirt you're wearing, you are very quickly entering into a time where you will no longer be known as a youth minister, but you will be known as a senior minister at a church.
Yep.
How's that feeling right now?
I don't know yet. I don't have an answer. I don't know yet. We will find out very shortly. And not looking forward to it, but I am looking forward to it. So I think I'll be more looking forward to it after June.
Yeah.
But I might
give you a month to kind of move past the goodbyes.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have it. I've never done this before, so I've never left a church before, so I can't tell you. I can't be like, oh, so the last one and the last one, like some youth ministers. They're like, oh yeah, I've done it before.
Yeah. No. I was gonna say you've done something that very few youth ministers have ever done, and you've stuck around for 6 years in your first ministry.
Yeah, my last Sunday will be 6 years.
That's incredible, man.
Yep. Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible. Somebody just actually put a heart up on the screen when you said that. So
I missed it. I didn't see it.
It just popped up on the screen. It was April Price posted that up there.
Gotcha.
So, but yeah, so okay, let's talk a little bit about this past week's message and kind of throw our spin on it a little bit. But this week we talked about giving grace to others, and this is such a good thing to talk about because of the fact that a lot of us just aren't good at it. I mean, we're really good at giving or getting grace. We're really good at receiving grace, but really giving it, authentically actually giving it is pretty hard. So the main thing today is that what we have been given freely by God, we must give freely to others. And so we've already got a comment today. It wasn't for that. LOL, I just got on. Oh, well.
She doesn't
love pretend me. Like it was for that. We'll pretend like it was for that because that felt really good at the time. I think the big thing that we're going to talk about today is kind of a battle that goes on within us, and I think everybody deals with it, and that's the battle of grace versus revenge. The two cannot exist together. They can't exist together. And so for us as human beings, not just Christians, but anybody, this ability to give grace versus revenge can be quite the battle. I mean, Rob, you're as close to perfect as anybody I know, but do you struggle with this?
Grace versus revenge? Maybe in certain circumstances. Revenge. I think I talk about it more than actually actions happen. I mean, you work with me, so I'd be like, I'll say something, and I think he's never going to do that. He's never actually going to follow through with anything he says. But I don't know. Is that just as bad, even if you think it? I guess, yeah. Sometimes I'm like, I wish I could do this. I'm not going to because I know it's not right, but I need to say it, I guess. And that's my human side coming out. Of
Yeah. I know for me, I'm always in this battle. I do a cost benefit analysis of things. Like,
yeah,
is
absolutely.
is the is the cost worth it? And so I want to ask the question. Let's just kind of talk about this. And if you're watching online right now or you're listening as you're driving in your car, um, what is the cost of giving grace? In order to give someone grace, what does it actually cost you?
Yeah,
Um, Rob, what do you think? What do you think are the costs of grace?
it costs you everything. Well, it should. You know, it cost Christ his life. Now he got risen from the dead, which is kind of a cheat code. But like the perfect example of grace is giving up everything for somebody else. Like taking the punishment for somebody else is giving grace.
Yeah.
And it should be a complete giving, and no, you shouldn't receive anything for it, except for probably the things that the Holy Spirit gives you, I would say. So you'll receive joy, you'll feel loved, and so there is some receiving, but it's like it's everything. It should be.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that April mentioned was pride. It can cost you your pride, and she's right about that. That is
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
something that grace is going to cost you. I would say it costs you the concept of thinking that you win, because
yeah,
the whole thing with revenge versus grace is that the reason you're getting trying to get revenge is because you want to win. You don't try and get revenge just because you wanna get revenge. You get revenge because you wanna come out on top, and so you have to give up that win
yeah.
in order to have grace. Um, I let me ask this, what is the cost too much? Is the cost too much to give grace?
Maybe. I don't know. I would say that like it's never too much.
Mhm.
Um, but if you look at my life, God is taking care of me my entire life, and the times where I was struggling, I trusted in Him, and I feel like He took care of me in the way that He wanted to. Um, so I don't know if it's not too much for God. I can't say it's too much for me. I'm sure
Yeah,
there's times I'm like, I don't want to do this, but it always ends up being the right thing at the end.
yeah. Well, I
So
think,
yeah,
for me personally, I think the cost of grace, of giving grace to somebody, in other words, really genuinely forgiving somebody, um, they're all selfish things. I think the cost of forgiving somebody is everything that it would cost you are selfish things. Your pride, the ability to win, being right. These are all things that are about me. They're not about that person. They're not even really about the situation a lot of times. They're just about my need to be better, and not necessarily good, just better. And so I think that in order for it to not cost too much, there has to be a sense of selflessness in your life. If you don't have selflessness, the cost will always be too much, because you can't handle um, that cost. Because to do that, you have to give up your um, your need to be the best, your need to be number one, your need to be the most important person in the room, your need to be always right, always on top. Um, and at least from my experience in watching people who struggle with revenge, it always comes back to me. It's never about the other person. At some point it was about the other person, then it just gets to a point where it's not really about the other person as much as it's about me. And it seems like that if you can get past me, grace can be so much easier to give. I don't know. I don't know if you agree with that or you think that's right, but that's
no, I agree. I think that's a part of it. That's a big part of it, and probably us being Americans is what that's what we resonate the most with. I would say because the cost of grace in India or China is it can be your life, where in America, we're not going to deal with that. Like, the cost of grace is something so minute and small, mostly because our government isn't overly corrupt, so they take care of a lot of the things that we don't have to deal with. So at the end of the day, if something really bad happens, if you want to seek revenge, you don't have to, because they'll be life in jail, and all you have to do is forgive them publicly, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like
That
you
makes
don't
sense.
have to face the thing for your entire life like in other countries. But I would say it's the revenge is a lot to do with just getting back to comfort. So somebody puts you in an uncomfortable situation, and you're trying to get back at that person so that you're back closer to your comfort level in some sort of way. And, you know, is it going to cost you to be uncomfortable for a while? Because you took not being in control, or you took what you said, like, you're not on top. Like, if you're comfortable with always being on top and somebody knocks you down, you're like, man, I need to get back at them, so I'm back where I'm used to being. Um, that can be difficult for a lot of people, especially people who deal with pride. And I guess everybody kind of struggles with pride in some sort of way, in a small or big way. Everybody has pride for something.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, some people's pride is very easily touched and poked, and some people's is such a individualistic part of themselves that other people can't intervene in that part.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Well, and Dave brought up something interesting when he talked about what he calls the revenge cycle.
Yeah,
And the thing that's interesting about the revenge cycle, at least from every time Dave's talked about this multiple times in
yeah,
the history of Catalyst. This isn't some like brand new thing that he just started talking about, but this it basically starts with something small, then it escalates, then it escalates, then it escalates, and by the time it's all done, uh, it's leaving just destruction in its wake.
yeah,
And it's amazing how with revenge, it just compounds and it compounds and it compounds until it gets out of control.
yeah,
And he brought up the scripture from Judges 15:3. This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I really will harm them. And we're talking about the story of Samson right now.
yeah,
And for those of you who aren't familiar with the story of Samson, he was one of the judges in the Old Testament. They were kind of it was before there were kings in Israel. They were the leaders of the people. And Samson was a judge, but he also had something called a Nazirite vow. And basically, he had this vow where he would not, he'd be abstinent. He would not touch alcohol. He wouldn't cut his hair. He couldn't be in contact with a dead body. These are all things that he couldn't do. And in return for all of that, he was given amazing strength,
yep,
Herculean strength, killing animals with his bare hands kind of strength. And so Samson, over the course of time, became very arrogant and pompous, and actually had broken every one of his vows except for cutting his hair. It was the only one he had that he hadn't broken. Um, and if he was to cut his hair, he would lose his strength. And so it was the only thing that he stuck to in his vow. He ended up marrying a Philistine woman who was their enemies at the time. He killed thousands of men,
yep,
all these things. And specifically in the story that Dave talked about, it's just how um, he kind of played around with the Philistines. They got mad and killed his wife and his son. So he in turn killed a bunch of them. Then they
yep,
in turn tried to capture him, and it just got one thing after another. Before too long, Samson's in prison. He's got no eyes,
yep,
and he has no strength because his hair was cut. And then in one last fail swoop, God gives him the strength he needs, and he kills 3,000 Philistines. And if you go back to the beginning of the whole thing, uh, there were no dead people. There was no vengeance. But by the time
nope,
this whole thing was done, more than 5,000 people are dead.
yep.
like that's a pretty intense revenge cycle.
Yeah.
Um, let me ask you this question because I don't think revenge happens on a first situation basis. I don't think when you first meet somebody, they do something and then you just get into this crazy idea of revenge on them. Um, I think there's some history that has to come to play a lot of times when it comes to revenge. And so I want to ask you the question, how does personal history play into revenge?
Are you talking about history between the two people or just history in
Yes.
general?
Yeah. History between people.
Okay. Because I would say it's more history of your how you were brought up has more to do with it than history between people. Because I think if revenge is something that your parents did and that your grandparents did, or the people that you hang around with, that's something that they did, that's going to be your first inclination to do that. Or if you've had past experiences with people that have done it to you and done it to you, when you run across somebody who does something wrong, eventually it's just going to be your first thing that you do. But history between two people is always going to be, anytime there's tension, it's going to escalate if it's not talked about in a healthy manner.
Right.
Because I mean, I'm married to somebody, you're married to somebody, and there's tension sometimes. But we take tension and we make our relationship stronger. Where you can take tension and you can just bottle it down and bottle it down and bottle it down, and then eventually it explodes. And because you explode in such a crazy manner, especially like Samson, where it was like you got a riddle and then we're killing your wife situation, and then you take that and you tear down an entire town by tying animals together and setting them on fire. Like that was a big jump. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like these weren't little like I punched you, so I punch you back a little harder situations like when you're younger.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if you look at the situation, history is a big part of it because at the time, the Philistines were kind of ruling over the Israelites.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there was a bitterness there that these people who were their mortal enemies were actually ruling over them. And if you know anything about history in general, uh, people that don't like each other, when one of them begins to rule over the other, it's not good. It's
No.
never good. And so the situation was just bad. And so there's already emotion at play. And emotion is very dangerous when it comes to revenge.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah, and so there's already emotion involved, and now there's bodies lying in wait. There's people that are being killed. There are villages being destroyed, and all because of something kind of silly at the beginning.
Yeah.
But that's how it starts. And
Mhm.
I mentioned personal history because I know, like you look at families. I think I've seen more families torn apart because of revenge than anything else.
Yes.
Somebody gets dishonored in some way, and it could be something stupid, but they get
Yes.
dishonored in some minor way. Well, that turns into this thing happening, and then this thing happening, and then this thing happening. And before too long, the family's just at each other's throats, and it ends up costing those relationships.
Yeah.
So, talking about the
Yeah.
cost of giving grace, what's the cost of revenge? What is the cost? What do you have to give up to, enact your vengeance on somebody? What are some things, Rob, that you see that revenge will cost you?
I mean, you got to it can be as small as, somebody might think a little differently of you to losing your soul. I mean, there is a wide range of things that you will get cost because of the revenge that you have. I mean, you said the core of revenge is all about self.
Right.
Selfishness is like a huge sin amongst people, and you see it all through the Bible, and I mean, you see it in the world today.
Hmm.
And even the biggest like battles between nations, it's all because of selfishness. It's all because
Yeah.
I'm like, I am owed this, therefore, and man, I want to say like one specific thing that it cost you, but it's like it can cost you your entire life, like literally your entire life,
Mhm.
earthly life and eternal life
Yeah, and
in
and
one
it can
fatal swoop.
and it can cost just the way people see you. Here's
Yeah, I
Shannon
think.
Presley.
Yeah,
Shannon Presley said it'll cost you your soul.
yeah,
Absolutely, 100%.
yeah,
Um, but I think for for people that are so selfish that want to be seen as so great, like we were talking about earlier, you're not seen as great after a while with this kind of stuff. You start being seen more as petty,
yeah.
and you start being seen as selfish and bitter and all like if we're just being honest, those are not qualities I look for in people that I hang out with.
Yeah.
That's those aren't qualities for people. Like if I was single right now, the last thing I'm going to say is I want to marry a petty, selfish, self-centered woman. Like that's not anything that I would want to marry.
No.
And in friendships, I don't want those things in my friends. You just really the cost of revenge is so vast, which I come back to the cost of grace, and I honestly think the cost of revenge is much higher. I
Yes.
really feel like it's much higher because of the fact that in giving grace, you're doing as God asks, but by enacting your revenge, you're doing the opposite. And so, um, the cost, just the sheer cost of revenge from just a cost benefit analysis, like I was talking about earlier, revenge doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
And I rarely find anybody who gets vengeance that feels better when it's over with.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, you
Yeah.
can even get into the current climate of political stuff, and it's all about justice, and it's never enough.
No,
They say it is, but it's not, and it never will
no.
be. Like when somebody gets hurt or somebody dies, there will never be a revenge that you could do to make yourself feel better
Mhm.
because you can't raise somebody from the dead. Or if somebody, like if there's a cheating relationship or there's like anything, I mean anything, it will never be back the way it is.
Yeah.
And that's part of it.
Well, and I would even go so far as to say, like, we're in a time right now. Here's a good one. Renee Basham says, if your friends are revengeful, it wouldn't be a good friendship. I wouldn't feel open and honest because I'm worried of the revenge. Yeah, 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
100% agree with that. Um, the real danger with vengeance is the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And I think it's that way with anything. I think the more you give grace, the easier it becomes. But the
Yes.
scary thing about vengeance, and I genuinely mean the scary thing about it is if you get good at vengeance, you are gonna slip so far away from God. Like it's we're talking walking in the opposite direction kind of stuff. I mean, there's a reason why God says vengeance is mine. It's not ours. It's God's. He's the only one who has a right to vengeance.
Yeah.
Um, but we live in such a weird society right now, man. You were talking about the political landscape. I get emails from companies because I do YouTube stuff, and I get emails from companies saying join the latest uh, movement. Join the latest movement. It's like, well, how many movements do I have to be a part of? You know,
Yeah.
and not that they're bad, not that there's anything wrong with them, but it's at a point now where if you're not part of every single movement that comes down the pike, you aren't a good person.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
know.
that's really the way it's communicated, and it's frustrating
Yep.
to try and navigate those waters of, I don't wanna be a part of every single movement that comes out. They're all good, but I can't do all of them.
Yeah.
David Kibler and I were talking the other day just about, there are so many worthwhile ministries and missions and causes out there that you can give your money to.
Yes.
But the
There's a
reality is you can't give to all of them. You don't have that kind of money. I don't have that kind of money. And so we can't get ourselves hooked on every single thing. And when you're living a life where vengeance is the modus or the motive, like always the motive, uh, you're basically burning it from both ends of the candle. You've got no energy left. You've got no brain space left after a while.
Yep. Yeah.
You get yourself so caught up in the next thing to be angry about, the next thing to need vengeance over, and you're incapable of anything but vengeance. It really becomes an all engulfing part of your life when you get to that point.
Yeah.
And I think the cost of it is just devastating.
I agree. I
So,
agree. It's kind of sad. I mean, you watch people do it. Um, you just kind of sit back and you're like, well, it stinks. Like like when something happens and there's vengeance involved, it's like you watch it unfold in front of you every
yeah.
single time.
And Laura
Every single
Baxter said, I think of it in a similar way to an addiction. People think finding vengeance will give them a sort of satisfaction. So when it doesn't, they continually seek to find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
You know, it's
100%.
also funny, and it's kind of light. It's lighter than what we're talking about, but the vengeance is a huge part in every single kid's TV, like movies, especially
Mhm.
growing up. Like vengeance was always like big thing, and then it would happen, and they realize, or they started to get back, and they realized it wasn't the right way.
Mhm.
Like every single time. And this is funny that we grew up watching these movies of people wanting to get vengeance, and it doesn't work out. And then they always turn and they end up helping like the good guy of the story. And even with like watching stuff growing up and telling us that it's not good, people still do it. And some people live for it. Like Laura was talking about, it can be an um, addictive thing.
Yeah. Back in the 80s, you had the Cobra, well, it's not Cobra, you had the Karate Kid. And the second episode of the Karate Kid, the second movie, they went over to Okinawa, which was where Mr. Miyagi was from.
Yep.
And they go over there, and Miyagi had a mortal enemy that actually used to be like a brother to him. And it was all be over a woman. You know, this whole thing was over a woman. And he just would not, I mean, we're talking 50, 60 years later, and he had no room for grace for Miyagi. Um,
Yeah.
but then one night when a hurricane or something came through, Miyagi started helping the village and doing all this stuff, and this man realized, I've been holding on to this for too long. I've got to let it go, and he did. But the problem was he had taught his grandson the wrong way.
Yeah.
And
Bad
because he
teacher.
taught his grandson the wrong way, he couldn't let go of the vengeance,
Yeah.
even though it technically had nothing to do with him. He
Yeah.
created a scenario,
Yeah.
which is really funny because YouTube came out with Cobra Kai a few years ago, and it's awesome. I just want to point that out. If you were a Karate Kid fan at all growing up, Cobra Kai
It's
is awesome.
incredible. I
But
know.
this past season, and I hope I'm not ruining this for any of you, if you have not watched it and you're planning on watching it, just put your fingers in your ears and go nah 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 for just a couple seconds, and I'll wave at you when I'm done telling the story. But in this past season, they go over to Okinawa. Daniel does, and he meets up with the grandson that wanted to kill him in the second episode of the Karate Kid.
Yeah.
And my wife just put spoilers. Um, but he goes over there and finds out this guy let go of it a long time before that. He got older, he grew wiser, and he let it go. And Daniel was terrified this guy was still going to come after him. And vengeance does a lot of things. It screws your heart up something fierce. I mean, you're doing heart damage. It also makes other people around you think differently of you, and some people literally will live in fear of you because of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Renee said it earlier with her comment about that's why she wouldn't have friends that are like that, 'cause she'd be afraid of if anything went wrong, she would be getting that vengeance on her.
Yep.
Said another favorite movie of mine. Oh, and by the way, you can take your fingers out of your ears and quit going nah 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 now. Um, Another favorite movie of mine is a character watching another character exact revenge again and again, and she says, "Ain't you tired, Miss Hilly? because it does make you tired. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vengeance is exhausting.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
There's not
And
all what does he say? People aren't all bad, but there are bad teachers.
yeah.
There's not bad people, there's only bad teachers, maybe.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. Like I would say it's vengeance is taught more than bred through like history between people. Like they learned it from somewhere.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of and in our context, so Kentucky, there are certain parts of Kentucky that it's very much like it's always trying to get back. You're always trying to get each other's business and trying to put people down because it's supposed to make you feel better, instead of lifting each other up, which we're called to do as Christians. We decide that tearing each other down is a more benefit. And because of that, you look at some of these towns and they are, Hatfield, McCoy's, but like you look at some of these towns and they're just in ruin. And if you meet the people, it's because they want to destroy each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Laura Baxter said she thinks of the Princess Bride when Inigo, one of the characters, says he's been in the revenge business so long he didn't even really know himself anymore.
Yeah.
And Renee brings this up: Hatfields and McCoys. It's taught. Why you fighting? I don't even remember. Like
Yeah.
there
You
are
can get to that
people.
point.
Yeah, it got to a point towards the end of that whole rivalry where nobody could remember exactly what it was that started the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you look at people who fight with each other and battle with each other and war with each other, and typically it was a misunderstanding that went sideways
Yeah.
that turned into the other person doing something to that person. Then it just kept going, and kept going.
Yeah.
Renee actually is related to both the Hatfields and the McCoys. How about that one?
That's awkward. You're in the middle.
Her step grandfather. So it's not blood, but it is related. So we'll go with that. So Dave talked a little bit about what a church without grace looks like. And I don't know what your experience is with this, Rob. I know for me being a preacher's kid and having been in so many churches in my lifetime, um, I've seen graceful churches and I've seen graceless churches.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what your experience is with that. But I know they exist. And
Yeah,
there
they
are
do.
two things that Dave brought up. The first one is a church without grace is a church without joy. I mean, do you agree with
Yes.
that?
Yeah. So you remember the cost thing that we were talking about earlier? I would say the thing that you give up the most is the fruit of the Spirit. I would say that's the biggest cost because that's the sign of a Christian is how you show the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And joy is one of those. And yeah, I would say I wouldn't say that I've overly experienced that, or if I did, I didn't pay much attention to why there wasn't joy in the church. I mean,
Mhm.
I think every church has a season of not joy, and I've been at churches like that, but I don't think I was old enough to recognize if it was because of the vengeance or lack of grace that we were talking about.
Yeah.
I know
And
you've
I actually
experienced it.
just changed that one because I like that statement. It's not just joy.
Yeah.
It's a church without the fruit of the Spirit. I mean,
Yes.
you literally you can't have those and be vengeful. You're not loving.
Mm-mm.
There's no joy. There's no peace. There's no patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, or self control. None of those are in existence when vengeance is the way you operate.
Yeah.
Um, and no church can have that. I've been in churches where people are warring with each other. I've been in churches where
Yeah.
there have been battles, and it's ugly. It's just ugly. And
I've been a part of churches where there's individuals that do that.
mhm,
But I'm very easy. I'm very good at like when people do that, I just assume they're stupid and I don't pay attention to them. Um, that's probably not great, but like that's always what I've done. And so I know like my father, I hope he's not listening. My I've talked to my father-in-law before. He's been an elder, and every once in a while it will come out about stuff. And I'm like, that went right over my head. I didn't even notice that. I'm like, I didn't even pay attention to that person for years. And so
Yeah, it's amazing how much there is. Renee mentioned carpet in that comment that we threw up on the screen,
I don't got time for
and
that.
there are churches that have split over the color of carpet. It's like,
Yep.
wow, the
Yeah.
inability to show grace is amazing. I know when we were picking the carpet for the church, I did something that was probably the wisest move I've ever done in my life, Rob. You know what that move was?
You asked the ladies what color the carpet should be.
I did ask the ladies what color the carpet should be, and I made sure that they agreed, and if they didn't agree, I was gonna pick something else. And actually had them help, like, choose. So, uh, same thing with the colors of the chairs. I mean, I kinda
Yep.
knew what I thought would look good, but, hey, look at that. Julio loves it. The blue is great. Thanks, Julio. Appreciate that.
It's
Um
blue?
well, the chairs are blue. Okay, it's an
Yes.
optical illusion. Can I throw this out there real
It
quick?
is.
We got a little bit of
Yeah.
time today. So the carpet is actually gray with just small blue flecks in it. But
Yeah.
because of the
Okay.
lighting and the color of the chairs, it literally makes the carpet look like it's a shade of blue.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Even though the carpet itself is not blue. It is more of a gray color.
I just like
So,
the carpet.
yeah. Yeah,
I
I think it
watched that
looks
guy
great.
install that, and I was fascinated. He did a
Yeah,
great job.
it's a different kind of carpet. It's not typical carpet. It's tiles, and it's actually not glued down. It's made so if we screw up one of them, we can pick it up, put a new one in.
Yeah, it's a floating floor. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's crazy. Um, but so obviously a church without the fruit of the spirit, that is one thing that is a example of a church without grace. And the other thing is a church without authenticity.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and this one's pretty obvious. I mean, if you're gonna fight, that means you're probably showing up on Sunday faking it. That means when
People
you're
see through
around,
that.
yeah, when you're around, and
Yeah.
you really wanna go to church when nobody's being authentic. Do you wanna talk to people who you don't know for a fact are really telling you the truth, or they're giving you compliments that are kind of, I don't know, coming in from the side a little bit?
Yeah.
Um I know I've experienced churches like this, whether I was the youth minister there, or I was a member with my dad being the preacher, or I was there visiting when I traveled for my college, when I would sing a lot in different places. Um, you can pick up inauthentic churches pretty dang quick. Yeah, Renee says, and people can tell. Yeah, they can.
Yes.
They can.
Yes, you can.
What's your
Yeah.
experience with that, Rob? I mean, it doesn't necessarily just have to be churches either, but like people that it's very obvious that they're being very inauthentic.
Yeah. I just don't the church lingo, church high church. I want to tell this story. Recently I experienced I was put in a position where and I'm it's so different. Our context, we're in Nicholasville, Kentucky. Down to earth people where we go to Cattle's Christian Church. We if you don't know this, we are very intentional in not making it churchy when it comes to our sermons and how we communicate. And we often have conversations about how to change our language so that we try to include everybody, because we can't assume that people understand church language. Like that's a very important thing for us at Catalyst. And because of that, for the past 6 years, I just haven't used church language. And so whenever I'm around people that like they talk the talk, and I get immediately uncomfortable, and I think that they're not being authentic because of it. I'm like, that's not who you really like. If you're out with your buddies on the front porch, I don't think that they're talking like this. There's no way. And
It's kind of like when people say nourishment in their prayers. I've said this like 1,000 times from the stage at Catalyst. Anybody who's on here has probably heard me mention this before, but that
sure.
drives me nuts because nobody talking about eating goes, man, I'm so glad I'm eating this. This is nourishing me so well.
Yeah, my double cheeseburger from McDonald's. Yeah.
All the
So
nourishment
nourishing.
that I'm getting from this food is so awesome. Like nobody
Yeah.
talks like that.
Yeah.
But like
I
how
know.
many people when they pray and man, nourish our bodies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I authenticity, I feel like I'm spoiled at the current situation I'm in because we've eliminated the ability to not be authentic at Catalyst, and I think it's beneficial. I think people receive healing because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like, if someone's having a rough day, man, and I
Yeah.
love that. Man, I love, like, just
Yeah.
be honest, man.
It's funny. When I moved, I was in small town Kentucky before I went to Wisconsin.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and I dealt with a lot of people smiling to your face and then doing other things behind your back.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the North, and we just don't operate that same way necessarily. It's not saying it doesn't happen, but there's a lot less bless your heart going on up north as there is down here. You know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah.
When I
I
moved
do.
to Wisconsin, I jokingly told my friends, I said, when I moved up here, it took me 6 months, and I remembered what it was like to be in the North, where basically, instead of it being stabbed in the back, they just stab you in the chest. So you knew it was coming. Like,
Yes.
you never, people just told you who you were, what they thought about you. They were very honest. Now, sometimes that can hurt, but I'll be honest, I would rather face the honesty than have the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Julio
I think
Julio
so.
says he's been facing it with his family. It's hurtful. If it wasn't for this past Sunday, the old me would have flipped my lid, but I'm extending grace. That's awesome. And
Yeah. That can happen.
and bless your heart never actually means that. Hey, Julio, people from the North are rude. That's not necessarily true, man. That's not true. I've met some pretty rude Southerners.
Is it
So
more rude to not be honest
that's
or
a
to
good
be
question.
honest?
It's a good question to ask. So yeah. Julio, you better watch it. Those Northerners are gonna have revenge on
Hey,
you for
man,
saying that.
I've lived in the central part of kindness, which is Knoxville, Tennessee.
Oh
So
man.
I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I think that might be the mecca center of that bless your heart culture that you're talking about. I think because if you go south of Tennessee, you're getting closer to Florida, which is all Northerners. So,
Mhm.
man,
Yeah.
bless
Well,
his heart.
there's a hard line the moment you hit the Florida border.
Oh yeah,
It's like you go from Georgia and Alabama
yeah,
and then Florida,
yes,
and it's like, boom, it is not the South anymore.
no.
It's further south than both of them, but it is not the South anymore.
Oh, I know.
It's crazy.
I
Well,
know.
there was one last scripture that Dave talked about, and I want to go ahead and get to this so that we don't get too far off.
Yeah,
But he was talking about this guy who he owed the king money,
yeah,
and he just didn't have it. And the king realized he didn't have it. It was a rather large sum, and the king forgave.
yeah,
He forgave him. Then that guy turns around and he does the exact opposite to somebody who owes him money,
yeah.
and he wants him thrown in jail. Hey, look at your cat.
I know he's been
Um,
bothering me for like 10 minutes.
so he gets this guy thrown in jail, and then the word gets back to the king. The king's like, "Wait, hold up! I just forgave you.
Yeah,
Forget it." So then he sends him off to be tortured and beat until he can pay back his debt, which was probably never ever going to happen.
no.
So, just a quick comment here. Rhea says, I'd rather someone be honest with me than to be nice to my face than proceed to talk bad about me. People will always find out." Yes, 100%. I agree with that.
See, I'm the opposite.
You want people to talk nice to you and not tell the truth?
Absolutely.
Wow.
You can talk nice to me. Then I like, if you're talking bad behind my back, I'm like, oh, well, they didn't say it to me. So I was like,
I
oh,
knew better than that.
then the other person had to deal with it, had to deal with the whining, and I didn't have to. So if you don't say it to my face, then I just assume that, whatever.
It's not real.
It's not real. No, they didn't say it to me. Like, they didn't tell me that. I'm like, I'm not big on the gossip thing. Like, you hear something from somebody, I'm like, if they didn't tell me personally, I'm not going to believe it's true because it's not my business. So
You say that, but I don't 100% believe that.
I mean, there's probably some. I just lean. Okay, I lean that way. Not 100%. Sometimes I
Yeah.
want people to be honest because then it would just we could get so many more things accomplished if people were just honest.
Yep.
But I'm talking about like personal vendettas against me. That's what I'm talking about. Like, hey, if stuff's getting done, you can say anything you want behind my back. But
Well,
But
Jennifer
you have to
Woods
love me.
agrees with you. She would just rather not know.
Well, I mean, like, I'm gonna find out. Who said that earlier? You're gonna find out eventually. Who said that? That was your wife, right?
Those, yeah, people always find
Yeah,
out.
yeah. Like, of course, you don't understand. Everybody that's listening, when you're a youth minister, you know everything. Like, if you've ever been a youth minister, God has blessed you with the ability to know everything about people. And John will agree. I had a
It's
conversation with a
amazing.
student this morning.
It's amazing the stuff
I'm
you
like, I
find
know.
out.
I already know. You don't have to tell me. I already know. So,
Yep. And April Price said, "Be honest, but just be nice about it. Be honest in a nice way."
it's true.
So back to the story we were just talking about. This guy couldn't forgive, and there's a verse at the very end that I think is something I kind of want to sort of finish up talking about. But he says, "This is how my heavenly Father will treat you, each of you, unless you forgive your brother from your heart." Now we're talking about, um, we're talking about God looking at us and saying, if you can't forgive, you're going to be tortured. Because that's the words that are used in this. It says, "You wicked servant, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had in you?" In anger, his master turned him over to the jailers to be tortured. To be tortured.
Yeah.
I mean, what is that? What is the equivalent to that,
Yeah.
Rob?
That's going to hell.
Exactly. In other words, if we can't show grace, we can't go to heaven. I mean, that's these are Jesus' words. This is from his
Yeah.
mouth.
Yeah.
And you think about that. That makes it really, really heavy. Really heavy.
Yeah.
And it's so important that we learn to show grace. If we can't forgive and really forgive, not the surface forgive. That's the big thing. There's a difference between forgiving somebody and just saying the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you can say you've forgiven somebody and you're still holding on to it and you're still bitter and you're still a miserable human being.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so
Some
it's
people are
so
haunted by
important.
that.
What's that?
So a lot of people are haunted by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what people stay up at night and hardens your heart really quickly. And it eliminates you from the ability to receive that fruit of the spirit and the stuff that comes with that. Like it's hard.
Yeah, this is a great statement, April. It's a fantastic statement. The Lord's Prayer says to forgive us as we forgive others. How do we expect God to forgive us if we're not forgiving others?
Wait, you pray
That's
that prayer? That's a dangerous prayer. Why would you ask God to do that to you, April? I'm just joking.
You darn people that follow the Bible.
I know.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you. But I think that's a big thing for us to be thinking about is just Jesus flat out says it. He doesn't even play around with it. Like if you can't forgive, God can't forgive you.
Yeah, I know.
And I want to turn that on ourselves a little bit too. We have to be willing to forgive ourselves. That's something that a lot of us are really bad at.
I think everyone is,
Really
right?
bad at it. What's that?
Isn't everybody bad at that?
I think so.
I haven't met somebody that's good at it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm pretty good about forgiving people. Now forgiving and trust are not two things. Or
No,
like you can
totally
forgive
different
somebody
things.
and not trust them. That is okay.
Yep, that's fine.
But I'm perfectly okay with forgiving. But yeah, forgiving myself is very because like if you're like, man, if I just did this, I would be in a lot better situation than I am now.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
you just see it.
And Jennifer says that's the hardest.
Forgiving
And
yourself. Yes.
yeah, Laura Baxter says if we could truly, truly understand the depth of what Jesus went through to give us grace, it would make it so much easier for us to show grace.
Maybe.
She's
I don't
right
think
about
so.
that.
I think we would still not show grace because we're selfish. I think if we even even if we were right there and saw it, I think we would still struggle with it. I mean,
So why
you
do you
look
say
at
that?
Adam and Eve. What? Why?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Adam and Eve who walked with God and were in the most pure situation possible, and they still fell.
Yeah.
And like, unfortunately, it's just something that because of the choice of free will and God's desire for us to truly love Him, there is that other possibility. And with living in America, that is the biggest one, is to just try to make self greater than others.
Yeah. I think you
When
do agree with Laura though. She said it should make it that much easier for us to show grace.
oh, it should, yeah,
Yeah.
it
So
should be,
I think
yeah,
you do. I think you do. Like when you said you didn't agree, I was like, actually, she's pretty dead on with that. But yeah, I think you agree with her. It's just the idea that you should. Don't know where it originated, but if you feel vengeful towards someone, then pray for them to receive everything you have and want.
that's
Wow.
pretty good.
That's really good, Rob. That's really
That's a
good.
good one, Rob. Very good.
I know for me, forgiving myself has always been the hardest thing. That's always been the hardest for me. Like
Yeah,
to look at the things that I've done in my lifetime and actually forgive myself. Um, that's always been the hardest thing for me. And I would say there's probably several people listening, watching right now who would say the exact same thing. That is the hardest thing. It may not be forgiving other people, but I struggle to forgive myself. And that's something that we all have to get over. Um, because that's God wants that. When he forgives us, he forgives. So
yeah,
we can quit telling God that he doesn't have the power over that, whatever it was, and stop taking power away from God. You know, that's what my dad always told me. He said, when you aren't willing to accept God's forgiveness, you're basically saying God doesn't have the power to forgive you.
yeah. You're saying, no, God, I know better.
Yeah.
That's
That's a whole nother podcast right there, man. That's a
I
whole
know
nother
better.
live stream.
It's me. It's all about me.
Yep.
Mine.
Well, man, thanks for being on today. And thanks
Yeah.
to everybody. A lot of comments today. That was great. Love it when you guys are commenting and carrying on the conversation with us. I like this. I think it would be easier if we could see intentions. I see other people come and go, out of sight, out of mind. I'm always here. My mistakes sometimes face me daily. Harder to forgive. Yes. Yes, 100%.
Me
But
too. Me too.
yep. But a big thank you to everybody for being here. Just one real quick reminder, there's a men's retreat coming up next Friday, May 14th. It's going to be from 5 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at the Shane Shorts house. It's a free event, and the food is always good, the fun is always good, and the discussion is always fantastic. So make sure you guys come out to that. You guys, you male individuals, come on out, be a part of it. It's going to be incredible.
It's always fun.
So for myself and for Mr. Rob Harlemer, you guys have a great week. And next week, I will be out of the state, so we won't be having the live stream next week, but we will be back the week after that. So have a great week, guys. See you in a couple weeks.